So I guess what I'd say is when we get into this, let's not try too hard to worry about the plot points, because otherwise I think we're going to get into a black hole.
Hey, Smith, that's how you should open.
Yeah.
That's your lead-in right there.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. Hello, and welcome back to Off Radar. And we're going totally off radar today into you see what I've done there? It's so
I see you did that. That was good.
So off radar. I didn't even think of that. Anyway, I'm James Smith, and I'm joined by Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who in this planet, this world, we call him Nige.
The final frontier.
And James Eatock.
Hello.
And today we are talking about a film called Interstellar, which came out in 2014. Now, this film...
Is it a British film about drinking?
It is.
Oh, God.
Interstellar. Do you know the director's cut was actually called Interstellar Artois?
God. What is this just going to be like an episode where we just do bad jokes?
What do you mean? How's that any different from any other episode?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
It's true. Interstellar, which came out in 2014. Now, this was not recommended by one of us. But basically, every time I've gone to a pub and I've met someone and we talk about the podcast, which happens basically every time I meet anyone that has listened to it, everybody says, oh, you should do Interstellar. So we are finally getting around to do it. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You should stop wearing that big Interstellar t-shirt you love.
Ask me about Interstellar.
And he complains about it when we record the show. Oh, how rude.
It's true. Got Matthew McConaughey's face on my underpants.
All right.
And yeah, I think so.
I'll bet you
two notable people that have said about this film, Ben Bishop and Will Lucking. I think when both me and you were there, Nige, I remember him saying about it.
Yeah, did indeed.
And we were like, whew, okay. I guess first question, had you guys seen this film before we done it for the pod? Nige.
One of you. I had, I'm never sure you're going to go to. So, like I suited up and took the deep walk into space many years ago. I think, when did you say it came out? 2014?
Yeah.
I kind of saw it about 2015. I didn't see it in the cinema, which I think I think a lot of people absolutely love this film, probably had that big IMAX experience. So I remember the time when it came out, everyone was like, oh yeah, you got to shoot your IMAX. Unfortunately, I never got the chance.
Eatock, did you see it in the IMAX?
No, I did not. I did not see it at the cinema. Yes, I wish I had for some of its rather spectacular visuals. But yeah, I saw this, I'd say for the first time only a few years ago. Not to spoil anything, but I've seen it probably twice since.
Yeah, I think similar. Weirdly, one of the Nolan films around that time I didn't see at the cinema. Most of them I did. Like Dark Knight, Inception.
Yeah, I saw Inception.
I saw Tenet, as we know.
And also Oppenheimer, which, well, as we know and we spoke about in our Barbie episode a little bit, one of the highest grossing movies of the last, 20 years or something. I saw that at the cinema. I did a very quick see it or skip it on the podcast. So, yeah, check that out. But, Nolan is an experienced director. You do go to the cinema for his films. And, yeah, weirdly, one of the films that I didn't see, but I probably, like you guys saw it, a year or two after, and then I have seen it a couple of times since as well. It's kind of one of those films that you kind of feel like you need to watch again.
See, I hadn't seen it since I watched it like 10 years ago. This is the second time I ever watched it.
Okay.
Interesting.
So it's interesting. Very
all right. Yeah.
And the film is...
I've got older. The film stayed the same age.
Hey!
Actually, no, the film didn't get any older. That didn't make any sense. But I like it. It did get
Write
older.
in if you know that quote. So as we say, Kevin Nolan. Kevin Nolan.
He flies into Big Sam's black hole and oh my God.
Are we talking about Big Sam today? Kevin Nolan? No, it's directed by Christopher Nolan, written by Christopher Nolan, and also his brother, Jonathan Nolan.
He's got a brother?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not shocked he's got a brother. He's got a brother that works on the film.
No, that kind of shocked me as well, actually. But I think Jonathan Nolan and Christopher Nolan worked on this whole science thing together, like the Nolan science. And I think Jonathan Nolan had a lot of influence on that kind of more technical aspect of it.
Well, yeah, Jonathan Nolan as well was heavily involved in the creation of the TV show Westworld, which was quite a big thing a few years back.
Oh, was he?
Really?
Yeah. And he was involved in, obviously, like a lot of Christopher Nolan's films, such as The Prestige, Dark Knight, and of course, this. But yeah, I think Westworld's certainly the biggest other thing he's done outside of like a Christopher Nolan universe.
Right.
He was actually involved in this prior to Christopher Nolan getting involved. So he was writing the script, and I think Steven Spielberg was involved. So...
Wow.
Strange how he was the person that kind of recommended Christopher Nolan to get involved when he did, and then that's when the story was kind of formed. It's almost like two films pulled together, the kind of like Dust Bowl, and we'll get into the space exploration in the latter part of the film.
Wow. Starring Matthew McConaughey, he plays Cooper, Mackenzie Foy, who is young Murph, Jessica Chastain as older Murph. And
you have Ellen Burstyn as even older Murph.
Yes, yeah. Murph. She's not in it very much, but then you also have Timothy Chalamet. Apologies for the pronunciation of young Tom, and then Casey Affleck, who I didn't recognise, played older Tom, and then also Anne Hathaway, David Gowassi. And then Michael Caine obviously pops up in a Christopher Nolan film. And one actor I will not say until we get later into it, maybe, because...
fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
You could say John Lithgow.
Yeah.
From Further Up the Sun into Interstellar.
Johnny Lith.
But yeah...
I also like seeing Wes Bentley in this film.
Yeah, Wes Bentley.
Yeah, he's probably like most famously known for being in American Beauty, and I've not really seen him in anything since.
No.
And yeah, it's like, who's that devilishly good-looking chap? And he just does really well in this.
Even on this third or fourth viewing, I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, Wes Bentley. I'm sure his name's Wes Bentley, but it's just like, I remember him in American Beauty, and then he just kind of... like vanished.
Yeah, I'm looking at the films he's been in. There's not really anything I remember coming out. Apparently he was in Ghost Rider, which I've not seen. So,
Oh, I did. Oh, yeah, he was in that.
He was in one of the Hunger Games as well. But beyond that, it was like, apparently he was in American Horror Story for a good chunk of time as well, which I didn't realise.
Which is a very well-received series.
Oh, and now Yellowstone with Kevin Costner. But again, not something I've seen in anything. So it was nice to see him pop up in this.
Okay. So I've written a very top-level synopsis. I do not go too deep, and I do not intend to go too deep.
I might be looking forward to this more than our reviews. So I'm very much looking forward to your synopsis.
So Interstellar is set in the future, and Earth is on the brink of environmental collapse, and humanity's survival is at stake. Ex-astronaut Cooper, played by Matthew McConaughey, now lives and works on a rural farm with his daughter Murph and son Tom. In Murph's bedroom, she experiences some weird gravitational anomalies, as Cooper calls it, and discovers coordinates to a NASA facility. So there he meets Brand, played by Michael Caine, who explains he is engaged in a secret mission to investigate an exoplanet capable of supporting life. So he basically has a choice to live out his final days with his family or potentially save humanity. After a bit of convincing and back and fro, him with Murph begging him not to go, Cooper joins Romilly, Doyle and Brown's daughter Amelia, played by Anne Hathaway, who travel through this wormhole and pass into another galaxy. And their mission is to investigate these 3 planets to see if they can basically save mankind.
You're a well-educated man, Coop, and a trained pilot.
And an engineer.
The world doesn't need any more engineers. We didn't run out of planes and television sets. We ran out of food.
Dad, why did you name me after something that's bad?
No, we didn't.
Murphy's Law.
Murphy's Law doesn't mean that something bad will happen. It means that whatever can happen will happen. We must confront the reality that nothing in our solar system can help us. Now you need to tell me what your plan is to save the world.
The first thing in this film is it's set in, like we say, a farm. It's all incredibly rural and so different to obviously what comes when we go to space. But Matthew McConaughey being cast is quite surprising in some ways in a Nolan film. You know, you're kind of used to like obviously DiCaprio and
certainly at the time as well. It's before what do they call it? The
reconnaissance. The reconnaissance.
So apparently Nolan had seen an early cut of the film Mud, I think it was anyway, which is actually a pretty solid film, and realised that McConaughey is that kind of like perfect everyman, which is very much what his role is in this film. Like, as you say, he's a retired astronaut, he's working on a farm, he's very considerate about his family. There's quite a telling scene early on when he goes to like a parent-teacher meeting, and he's just like really defensive of his kids.
Like the Danny from Spooks.
Yep. Is it? I didn't realize that. You lot on your Spooks references.
I mean, he's gone on to obviously
much
bigger things than Spooks, but yeah.
Whenever he turns up, I'm like,
he was in there's so many big films.
But regardless, it was very interesting casting, and certainly at a time for McConaughey to be kind of a lead in a very, very big Nolan film. Like, big.
Had he done Magic Mike at this point? Because Magic Mike was obviously, it's a great film, but obviously that was one of the films where people were like, oh, this guy can act.
Well, Dallas Buyers Club as well. So.
Yeah, well,
Dallas Buyers.
He won a
I've got a feeling this was filmed sort of either at the same time, even though it was released before Interstellar. I imagine the production of Interstellar lasted a significant amount of time, to be fair. In fact, I know that because there's some trivia coming up about it later on about how the shots and how long it took for them to come together. In terms of Magic Mike, which I've never seen, that came out, I think, about in 2012. So it was about the same time this film went into production, because Mud, likewise, was released in 2012. And if you'd seen an early cut of that, it was probably about, say, 2011 or maybe even 2010.
Yeah, it must have been like, because obviously, McConaughey had done all these, films in the early noughties, where he would have been typecast as handsome
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Yeah. I mean, my reference to him was, I remember the first film I saw him in was A Time to Kill. In that,
which is decent,
which is really good. And then weirdly, I don't remember it very well, but it was in Contact as well, which obviously...
Oh, yes, of course.
It's funny you say that, because the people that were kind of involved in making this were very much involved in Contact as well.
Oh, wow.
Quite similar in some ways.
Yeah, I think a lot of this was kind of spun up. It was conceived by a producer called Linda Obst and a theoretical physicist, Kip Thorne, and they collaborated on Contact and had known each other since they were set up on a blind date, bizarrely enough, many years previously. They conceived the scenario based on Thorne's work about the most exotic events in the universe becoming accessible to humans, and obviously that attracted Steven Spielberg, as I mentioned before. He was kind of sniffing around this, and I think it was maybe 2007 that Jonathan Nolan got brought in to write the screenplay, and then sort of Spielberg did his old DreamWorks thing. Things happened in the film industry, and it was only later on that eventually Christopher Nolan got involved. But it's definitely bizarre, that link, very strong link back to Contact, which McConaughey was in.
A weird link, but his character, McConaughey, he feels like I was saying, so authentic, and we know him as such a versatile actor. We know he morphs into whatever character he's playing. But it did strike me when you first watched this film that this is quite different for Nolan. You're going for a rough, rugged, kind of looking guy, but also someone who talks a bit, with a kind of his words go into each word. He's not like perfectly got that dialect,
that
like
southern drawl.
like DiCaprio, who's a mega
He does a lot of like. Yeah, a lot of his dialogue is kind of it's much lower register. Yeah. So just going on talking down here, but it works
perfectly.
Like, it really works for his character.
And obviously, like we develop this kind of relationship with him, and especially him and his daughter. Have this bond right from the off. Felt a bit sorry for his son,
but his son seems quite, I think, mature. Like I get the impression after his wife's death, the mother of his two children, I feel like the son kind of, adapted better to it than Murph.
Yeah.
But not that there's all these emotional scenes about like mother's gone or anything like that. But Murph seems to be the one that is, very much a daddy's girl. But I do love their relationship is really kind of explored from the beginning. I will say there is one. When they, I think they're driving in the pickup truck and they get a flat. And there are a few scenes where it's like, I get that this is kind of expositional. You need to have this in the movie, but it did feel a bit forced, like her randomly saying, why did you name me after Murphy's Law kind of thing. And there was another one. I understand that they're talking about how these characters are defined, but it just feels like it felt a little bit forced at the beginning, at least. But I understood why it was there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think I felt similar actually, but almost throughout the film they sometimes like ram that down your face a little bit too much. But I do love. I know obviously we'll get into it, but I do love the relationship between he and Murph. That it's not only explored as a father-daughter, in the past as it were, but you get like three dynamics on that relationship. I love. So when he first goes up into the mission, into the rocket. But what you were talking about there with the sentimentality, I actually really thought that it was really well done, that they didn't have, like Armageddon, everybody watching as he's going up into space and crying and stuff. That's the bit they do really well. So you see that, but actually they're so removed from that. And they could have hammed that up and it would have been like we said, like Armageddon or Deep Impact or something.
I got to say, it's so easy to compare this film to Armageddon at times, in the sense of here's how to make a movie.
Yeah.
Here's how to make a popcorn Hollywood movie where you just turn your brain off. And obviously they're intentionally two different films. Armageddon, was that Michael Bay or was that the other one who makes big?
Yeah. So the film Armageddon is directed by Michael Bay.
Michael Bay. Wow.
Yeah, because think about it, loads of explosions, lots of kind of popcorn acting.
Written by J.J. Abrams as well.
There you go. It really it's ticking all boxes there. But yeah, I understood they're two totally different movies. I shouldn't compare them, but it is easy to compare, like you say, Smith, with the ship going up and we just
the
get
Apollo 13 moment, of the kind of the crying and stuff. But you don't get that, but you do get the sentimentality elsewhere
of course,
certain points in the film, which you do need. You need that emotional connection.
I did love how the countdown to the rocket ship took place as he was leaving his family. I thought that juxtaposition was...
he's driving, like
he's
5,
driving 4, and it's 10, 9, 8, and it's...
that's really nice.
And then it just cuts to 0... Wow, that's brilliant.
But for me, we're talking about comparable films like Gravity with Sandra Bullock and Clooney. That came out in 2013, which actually predates Interstellar, which I didn't realise. So I just checked a moment ago. But again, there just seems to be this kind of period in Hollywood where this trend essentially appears. And then, a year afterwards, you had a film like The Martian come out, which again had a very similar trend to this film. So there was just that run of very similar films.
Well,
a very specific similar trend.
It almost had a spin-off story.
It's true.
And the guy who appears in both those films spoke to the director, Ridley Scott. And,
Matt Damon, basically, we might as well say.
So Matt Damon spoke to Ridley Scott and said, I'm not sure about doing this film. I've just done a film about space, and actually Jessica Chastain's in it as well. And Ridley Scott just turned around to him and say, it's a different fucking movie. And that convinced him. So that's all he needed to say.
And then there's also the Michael Caine bit I got to talk to just before we leave Earth, actually. So we go into the boardroom and Michael Caine says, we're not meant to save the world, we're meant to leave it. And he basically, as I said in my synopsis, Michael Caine is Nolan's Michael Caine. He played it in Prestige, he's done it in Inception. He's basically done this same wise old man character, who, by the way, is meant to age about 50 years in this film and doesn't really. But
he just sits in a wheelchair and says, I'm knackered.
Yeah, I'm knackered. I look still 70 or whatever.
I mean, I will say this, though. I do love his role in this film because it's Michael Caine.
It's great.
Like, in certain scenes later in the movie, it's just like, oh, that's kind of why you get an experienced actor like this rather than, don't get me wrong, obviously there is a lot of talented elder actors, but, Caine does bring such kind of fucking gravitas to a role.
Well, he's just so different, isn't he, as well, from, because he's English as well, and he's just got that voice and that look. He's just so different to basically any other character in this film. And I guess all the characters are quite different in their own ways.
They're all very unique.
Yeah,
I love Hathaway's, the fact that what I love about Anne Hathaway's presentation, and maybe sounds wrong in some ways, is that she doesn't look like glamorous Anne Hathaway. She looks like Anne Hathaway, the astronaut. Don't get me wrong, still incredibly beautiful, those big eyes, which are fantastic for any director for scene emotion, because she's got these gorgeously big eyes. But there's some shots, like, and you're watching this in HD, you can see, like, I'm sure she does have some makeup on, of course, because otherwise light's going to be bouncing off her and stuff. But they do a really good job of making her look normal. Is the best way I can put it.
Really,
she doesn't, like, you
almost unrecognisable because she's so normal.
I think it's the haircut as much as anything else. It's actually kind of like boyish, I suppose, like being shorter.
But if you look, she, like, like I say, I mean, obviously she's a very beautiful woman anyway, but it's... it would have been so, if this was another film, let's say a Michael Bay movie, should have probably been in negligee, on the spacecraft, rocking loads of, like, makeup and stuff. But thankfully, it's not that kind of movie.
I think that's the thing with Nolan, isn't it?
Lingerie in Space does sound like a good movie.
It's in the director's cut then.
Yeah, Interstellar too. Lingerie in Space. I think that's the thing with Nolan's imagination and his kind of what he does with filmmaking. He's always trying to push things beyond what we think, and sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly. Like Tenet, we've spoke about in the podcast. Which all three of us were not big fans of, but go and listen. This film goes to another level of trying to push the audience out of their comfort zone in every way. But it does start off with a fairly grounded story, like we say, and then we kind of enter space and have this almost peaceful quietness. And your kind of comparison of Gravity, which I only watched again like about 3 weeks ago, funnily enough, is really interesting because it does have that kind of almost serene, you get all the Hans Zimmer, like, blah, 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 and then we settle as we get into space.
That's what going for, like, what do we want in this film? Big pipes? No.
I want it to sound like an old man, like on the toilet. Okay.
But and then like in space films in general, I mean, I don't know if you guys are big fans of them. I'm not always.
Yeah, Muppets in Space.
But Muppets in Space. But like any time I watch a space film, like I always just think of Red Dwarf when they're going through like wormholes and black holes and like all of these kind of actual scientific things that we do, like in Star Trek and stuff. But Red Dwarf always has this it just makes me think of it. So when they first go through this wormhole,
go on.
I mean, look, I'm not comparing it to Red Dwarf. Don't.
Well, you are. I'm just going to say, like, obviously,
this is nothing like Red Dwarf, Smith. You're totally missing the mark.
No. I understand where you're coming from, but I'm saying there have been a few shows, some famous ones, I think, called Star Trek and maybe Star Wars movies that have dealt with wormhole, abilities and stuff like that. So I think in that sense, and I think that lends itself to what we get later in the movie, is just the ability to comprehend some of the more complex stuff. As a lot of the stuff in this movie in terms of time, space, and turning things from something we don't really understand into something physical.
What are you waiting for? Let's go. Go, 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 go. 7 years per hour here. Let's make it count.
Visually, this film is incredible. The first planet we go to is like the aquatic one, I think. And, this is the one where...
The giant waves.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, so for every our 7 years on Earth passes, basically. So every time they're down on this planet, 7 years passes back at Earth or out of the atmosphere of this aquatic
they do
planet.
that with every planet they visit. And the great thing about that is it sets, the classic, maybe it's a trope or whatever, but it sets that thing of, it's a race against time. But this is literally a race against time itself. And the idea that, and it's all, a lot of the science in this film, what I love about it is it's kind of grounded and based in reality. Of course, time works differently. When we eventually get to Matt Damon's planet, he's saying like the day, days here last 60 something hours.
You were just saying about that kind of science being true. Yeah, like the astrophysicists that were involved in this, the guy I mentioned earlier that was involved in Contact, they made sure for this.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, as realistic as possible. And he actually made a bet. So it's Dr. Kip Thorne was the most heavily involved person. Christopher Nolan, I can imagine he's the sort of person that once he gets his teeth into something, he wanted that realism factor to be like 100. But Kip Thorne had a scientific bet against Stephen Hawking upon the actual astrophysic theory that underlines a lot of this film.
Wow.
And as a consequence of that theory and that bet, Stephen Hawking had to subscribe to Penthouse magazine for a year. So that's what he got for losing. So it's nice to see that even the brightest minds like some juvenile humour.
Cancel it and resubscribe.
yeah, that'd be great.
Already got that one.
That water play it's like one of my, I wouldn't say it's, because there's so many great scenes in this film, but I think it's one of my favourite scenes because the thing I love, and it's maybe it's a bit obvious, maybe it's not, but this is where, I nearly said Kevin Nolan.
I keep thinking
this is where Christopher Nolan's use of sound is fantastic, because not everybody would do this, but when they first get to that planet and it's stated that time moves very different here. So be quick, get on the planet, get the readings. And
poor old Romilly's stuck up in space.
He's stuck up in space. So
they're like, we'll make it quick. Be
there an hour.
Well, it's 7 years.
But they get to the planet, and the first thing I think it's the moment when they get off the little ship they land in, you get this like the music is almost like a little.
It's like it's like almost like a time
a ticking clock.
Gravity's punishing.
And I think Anne Hathaway's character is talking about something, and she says, maybe I'll head towards those mountains. And then the camera slowly kind of trucks in towards McConaughey. He's like, those aren't mountains. And you're like, what? And then the camera kind of focuses, like in that wonderful Christopher Nolan way, and you realise these things coming at them are just the biggest waves ever. I'd love to know and I bet you any money they did do the mathematics on this, because I'd love to know the height of those waves, because they're ludicrous. Because obviously
they got Michael Bay to be surf's up.
It does. It's so tense, that bit though, because
it's horrible.
Obviously, so they're out of the ship. They're trying to get the black box or whatever from
that's pretty much it.
The previous ship that landed
even
there.
Though it's an orange box, but
yeah, okay. And basically, as it's coming, the waves are coming towards them, and that build of tension and like you say, that brilliant build of music. But then all of a sudden,
well, I just looked at the ticks, and apparently it's a tick every 1.5 seconds, because the time dilation due to the gravity from the black hole, every tick represents approximately 1 day. So every tick is a day.
Yes, you are.
We got to talk about the robots, Case and Tars, because they're great. Like, I remember the first time I saw this, you see these robots, but with very, I guess, scarily, to where we are now in terms of AI technology, very kind of real robots. You can see 10 years from now, if that, robots having those kind of personalities of just, and
the fact that they've designed them not like a human though is really,
again, I love that.
They've made it like a robot, but with just human emotion, or not emotion, human.
Oh yeah, I love the way him and McConaughey have jokes about the honesty levels, the humour levels. And there's a really good joke towards the end of the film where he's like, humour level 75, and he starts telling a joke, and he's like, drop down to 65.
And then he goes, knock, knock, and he goes, do you want it 65?
Yeah.
It does. But it's they have an honesty level. There's all these different levels they can set them to. But these robots are designed so uniquely, and that's again another testament to this movie, which I'm sure was heavily researched about what would a robot, you think of robots like, Robbie the robot from Lost in Space or Forbidden Planet, those kind of, humanoid robots. This is just a large rectangle with kind of 3 main kind of sections, but the moment I love is that when you see these sections are able to not transform, but just manipulate and move in different ways. And the best bit, like you're talking about, is when I think it's Tars, or is it Kate? I think it's Tars, goes to rescue Anne Hathaway's trapped under the thing, and it turns into almost like this cog where like 3 sections turn, and it just goes effortlessly across the ground.
And because it's going through the water as well, it adds to that. Yeah.
It's really well done. And again, this is all bloody special effects, but it looks so convincing.
It's amazing. I was just reading, sorry, this might be stepping on trivia slightly here, but that Nolan didn't use any green screen in this film. So this is all sets and actual places. And then obviously he's used CGI, but not green screen. So he's not in a studio. They're not in studio with ropes and floating around and stuff.
I just love the idea of Christopher Nolan using puppets or something. It's just like, here's a robot or a bloke in a suit, in a rectangle suit. Here I come to rescue you. But they rescue Amelia, get aboard the ship, except poor old Wes Bentley
Craven.
He just doesn't get in quick enough.
John Craven doesn't make it.
There is some fan theory that he's declared drowned, and they fly away, and we see it when they come back to him, and you see his spacesuit lying face down. It sort of cuts back. There's a theory that he didn't actually drown because he had the oxygen within his suit, and that because how time passes on that planet, that essentially they could just go back at a later time and rescue him, because it's only been a small amount of time for him since they left the planet.
Well, as they say, when they're leaving, they haven't left the planet yet. They're talking, and they're like, and they realise that the previous explorers had only probably been on there like an hour before or something, because they're like, well, why is the wreckage still here? And they're like, well, the previous explorers it was probably only an hour ago that they landed or something like that. It's just like, oh my god,
it's so hard to get your head around because it's been years and years. Do you fancy sending us a film to review or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
What we've not really mentioned, the Dust Bowl, the planet is, like Sis said in his synopsis, obviously, like, the Earth's failing, the crops aren't growing anymore, and there's these huge dust storms that cover everything. So, like in McConaughey's house, when they serve water, they immediately put something over the top of it because the dust just gets everywhere and there's just no way of keeping it out. And unfortunately, for a lot of people on Earth, like, their lungs are basically being suffocated because of this dust. And poor old Casey Affleck goes like full hobo beard, dishevelled, like wearing a hoodie, basically looking like anyone who lives in Shoreditch. And that's not good.
But then the last message he receives is from Murph, who now has turned into Jessica Chastain. Yeah. It's just like, oh wow.
We've not mentioned, like, when McConaughey goes to fly away into space, they have like a hard breakup, really, don't they? Like,
but she hasn't spoke to him for for a long time. I think she doesn't send messages.
She feels betrayed,
and it's something that that is part of this film, isn't it? It's that whole kind of the sacrifice he has made for humanity, but
it's abandonment. It's love.
It's a real hard thing for her to get her head around, especially as a young girl.
And it's not like she didn't have the opportunity because she goes to work for John Brand, like the professor,
the very company that took her dad away.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she's working on all that theory, working on the equation, but she won't have anything to do with her father at all at this point.
Well, and I mean, at this point, they all believe he's been lost in space, as it were, because
I think it's like been 27 years.
Yeah, that's roughly about right. Yeah, so it's he gets this message from her, and then what I think this film brilliantly does is she leaves. He finishes watching the message, and now we're back on Earth with her character.
And now we get, I guess, it's true, actually.
That part of the story.
Yeah. We can flip between these parts of the story rather than just being in space for that whole part.
Yeah, because you can do space and just have the messages or awkwardly go back between the two. But I think they do a really good job initially.
Yeah, I agree. You have that whole planet section, and then all of a sudden we're back on Earth, and she's like trying to figure out the theory and stuff like that. So you still get that connection to what's going on. Otherwise, as an audience member, I feel you could become a bit detached, much like they might be in space, from the reality of what is actually happening back home.
Yeah.
Well, the reason she contacts them as well is because she's now the age he was when he left Earth.
Which he said to her, didn't he? He's like, when I next see you, I might be the same age or something.
Yeah, might be the same age, yeah. I mean, Jessica Chastain is a great actress anyway, but she kind of pulls that kind of gravitas into this role that brings that emotional attachment. And I think Michael Caine does a really good job of that as well. But yeah, you've got to be invested in this story for the people on Earth as well as those in space, or the film would just fall down a little bit. But I think they do a really good job with that.
We're not meant to save the world. We're meant to leave it. And this is the mission we were trained for.
I've got kids, Professor. Get out there and save them.
I have no idea when you're coming back.
I'm coming back. We must reach far beyond our own lifespans.
It's amazing when we get to Matt Damon's planet, as we call it, because I forgot he was in this film.
Oh no, I remembered.
Well, I thought he voices one of the robots as well.
Oh, does he?
Does he really?
I may be talking about my arse. Let me do a bit of research.
Do a bit of research while we... They approach, and it's like, this doesn't seem like a very inhabitable planet. This is just us, the audience.
Yeah, it's all desolate and big. It's like, how can this planet be somewhere that we want life on? Whereas at least with the aquatic one, obviously there's water, right? So, with water, there's... that's where life comes from. But yeah, with Matt Damon's planet, it's the polar opposite, and it's
polar being the
it's like the Arctic. But yeah, the kind of the contrast between that and the aquatic planet, but then also the humongous contrast between all three of those, space and then back home, and then even the end kind of section, which we'll get to as well.
Just to go back to Matt Damon's voice, it was actually Bill Irwin who was the puppeteer, but when I heard it, I thought, like, that's Matt Damon's voice, and I completely forgot that Matt Damon was in this film, and I was like, oh, that's so weird. Like, Matt Damon's in the film, and he did The Martian quite soon after this. I can't see why he'd do two space films. It just shows up.
Nigel's on another planet, possibly in another dimension.
I forgot Matt Damon was going to appear, and then obviously they kind of wake him up like out of this kind of pod thing, and then it's like, oh my god,
like, who it's Matt Damon. Because when you don't know, it's like, who's it going to be? It builds the
it's like the Scooby-Doo.
You think it'd be like a no-name actor, it'd be like, oh, that's a bit
and it's
what
like
I like
Matt
is
Damon, and you're like, oh man.
When they first wake him up, there's a few little hints that something's not right. Like, he's saying this planet is, on the surface it's not very thing, but when you get down lower, that's where there's breathable atmosphere and da-da-da-da. So it's like, okay, so at the surface level, this planet isn't right, but Matt Damon's telling us that everything's good. But then there's one moment where they look towards his robot, which is called Kip. I wrote that down. And it's like, oh, what happened? He's like, oh, the robot, I had to dismantle it. And right away, I remember the first time I watched this thinking, well, it's not. I'm not trying to be Mr. Clever Dick, but it's
he's
like,
a baddie.
These robots kind of, these robots know everything. Why has he dismantled it like by hand? These robots tend to be quite quite durable, quite able to comprehend so much stuff. So why would he have dismantled it prior to anyone coming to find him? So anyway, we don't know that, and let's go and have a look at. Let's go and explore the planet of a man. But this is where, oh my God, we get like two twists that happen at the same time. The first is man's planet, Matt Damon. His planet, it turns out, isn't inhabitable. He just wanted rescuing because, as Matthew McConaughey calls him, you fucking coward. And at the same time on Earth, we learn from his deathbed, Michael Caine, Dr. Bran, the plan was never to get people to evacuate Earth because he solved the theory that Murph has spent decades trying to solve. He'd solved that decades earlier, and he just realized that we can't get off the planet. So this is just a mission. People going off into space, we're never going to see them again, but they're going to take humanity with them because they've got these
little kind of tadpole things or whatever.
Tadpole things. They've got life in these embryos, and they've got life in containers that they're going to populate other planet or the other planet that they end up in. But the plan was never to save the people. It was a big lie.
He keeps doing that Dylan Thomas poem, doesn't he? Like, do not go gentle into the good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day.
Rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end, no dark is right. Because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light.
But then we get this kind of crazy moment where Matt Damon
he flips out.
Absolutely flips, doesn't he? And he tries to stop McConaughey.
Well, his character wants to return home, but he realises the only way he's going to survive and get to another planet is by using that spaceship. So he knows he can't stay on a destitute planet. Because as we found out, it doesn't support life at all. So Matt Damon's
I really liked the scene where he's basically punching him in the mask, and the oxygen or not oxygen is getting headbutts him. It's
like you've got 50-50,
and he's like, and then
better odds than I've had in a long time.
Best odds I've had in years.
But it's really well done. The tension there is beautifully done as we're trying to now save Cooper. Obviously, as the audience, he's going to be saved, but there is that sense of jeopardy and the fact that he could be severely injured, if not die, at this very moment.
We cannot survive here. I'm sorry.
What I really like about their fight is that you can tell that, as horrific as Matt Damon is being, there's still an element of humanity in him. He's saying, he's trying to make it easy. He's like, listen to my voice. He's like, the children are the last thing you're going to see because your mind is going to be grasping for life. And he's like, I'm sorry I had to do this. So he's very apologetic, as he's murdering this man.
He's buried out back with Mom and Jesse.
You faked all the data. Yes.
And especially because of the music they use. Smith mentions Hans Zimmer.
I mean, Hans Zimmer is, I think, becoming one of my favourite composers of this era. And I know he does a lot of Nolan stuff, but he's done so many great films. But instantly, Candyman, did you say? Oh wow!
No, he didn't do Candyman. He did not.
Yeah, of course.
No lies.
But you do associate him and Nolan going hand in hand now. Especially Inception and Interstellar. I'd say two of the.
I think Dunkirk as well. Yeah.
I still ain't seen that. I haven't seen Dunkirk.
Honestly, the soundtracks. This film is largely about time and stories kind of interconnecting, and that ticking again is just so prominent in the film. I think whether or not they kind of did it for Interstellar, they realised it works and took that forward. But 100%.
But some of this is kind of it's quite in this film. It's it's obviously it's quite spacey at times, but then there's obviously the big drones that he likes to use and that kind of thing at certain moments. But the tension and the build, sometimes his sound and music is a little bit more understated in the film. When you said when we first get to the aquatic planet, but then it goes big. It goes into the right areas. His music,
beautiful.
It's like you could listen to that soundtrack on your commute and be like, wow, I feel like I'm living it.
I was going to say, but also it lends itself to how good Nolan is as a director on this film, is that he doesn't overuse it.
True.
It'd be so easy, and some of these space shots just have big orchestral scores, but he doesn't always. When Matt Damon is sucked out into space, we just have silence for that moment, not doo-doo or anything like that. It's just that whole thing is just done silently, because that speaks more than any musical kind of clash.
There's no kind of sound in space, that old trope. When there's an explosion, you're seeing it from the inside where there would be sound. You don't see it from the outside. I think that's quite telling. This film got nominated for 5 Oscars, and 3 of those for actually sound-related things. So the best original score, best sound editing, and best sound mixing. But the only one that actually won was best visual effects. And again, we spoke about the lack of the CGI stuff. Even when the spaceships were kind of miniatures and they were done in certain ways because it gave a more realistic look.
Oh, really? They did miniatures on that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the old school, I suppose, in it.
Old school techniques, yeah.
And I said, like we said about the puppetry for the robots as well, which again, like it's really unusual. And then just taking that puppeteer out of in post production as well, like because they were obviously being the shot. But going back to the visual effects, one of the things that we sort of said about like 7 years equals 1 hour on the longest planet, a day expires every 1.5 seconds, as we mentioned earlier. When they're actually doing some of the visual effects afterwards, so for the black hole, for instance, it was so scientifically like accurate that it took approximately 100 hours to render each frame.
Wow.
Now, I know Smith is someone who's kind of been involved in editing and rendering and stuff like that. To do that in the physics and visual effects engine, so every second on screen, 100 days
there's quite a lot
to render
in
the final copy. Yeah, because like I said, it was every single frame. Like that's how long it took on the visual effects side. Like,
and
just
a lot of that will probably be this kind of big ending scene, I imagine, where the visual effects. This is the moment where the visual effects are basically like pretty astonishing, really.
They're trying to, slingshot, and they're using all the science in the world to try and make their ship lighter. So I think it's like maybe TARS is dropped out on one ship, so it's like all three. Like I think there's like 3 ships joined, and they all kind of go. One drops off into the black hole. I think that's TARS. He's like, yeah, it's been good. See you later. He goes. Amelia's under the impression that one of the other robots in a ship is going to go, and then realizes that, oh my god, it's Ranger 2. It's the one that Coop is in, because they're in separate ships. And then she realizes, oh my god, he's about to enter the black hole and sacrifice himself so that I can get to the other planet using Gargantua to kind of slingshot.
And they call
around.
back to 90% honesty. Which
yes.
Is like, comes back to
that was so good.
The TARS robot is sort of on that level of their emotions and how they interact.
So not only has he sacrificed potentially seeing his family for the last time in his life to go and find this new planet, he's now sacrificing himself to someone he's only pretty much met over this whole exploration and will potentially never see.
Oh, but they've been together for like 100 years.
Yeah, technically. What I do love about what I love about the moment he enters the black hole, though, is that we just get it from his perspective. So we're going into it, and he's in his ship.
Screens.
Oh, it's very 2001, isn't it?
Oh my god, so. But absolutely. Whilst also being its own kind of thing. But I love when he's going into it and he's still reporting on it, because that's the explorer in him. He's like, oh, I'm experiencing great turbulence kind of thing. And then the ship starts breaking up and you're like, what the hell? So he pulls, oh my god, it freaks me out when he does this, because when you think about what he's actually doing, even in space, this would freak you out. But he's pulling his eject, because the ship's like eject. So he ejects, and he ejects out into a black hole. Nothing into nothing, and that's like so.
It's one of those things that you just can't really get your head around, isn't it? Like,
well, you can't comprehend it. It's like, not to get too grim, but it's like death. Death to me is I think the one thing in life I'm scared of. Not the idea of dying. It's the idea of there's no existence. Nothing ever happens. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever happens before or after. But the world around you does
depending
still go
on your
on.
Religious outlook.
But then on religious beliefs, of course. But in this, it's like it's him and infinity.
But he's alive.
And then he's alive, and then suddenly he's like falling towards something, and then we get, like as Smith was saying, all these wonderful visual effects, and it's like, oh, he's falling into like a weird construct,
it's like a kind of like building elastic bands, almost like tied around.
It's kind of like Inception, where they do all that freaky stuff with the buildings. It's very similar to that, even though it turns out it's actually his daughter's bookcase, which kind of blew my mind.
It's so beautiful. It's so.
I still remember the first time I watched it, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
I think
I was outraged. Like, I was like, this is nonsense.
Oh,
really? I really was.
Really?
The first time I watched this, I found the whole thing a bit preposterous. There's bits where I've been kind of like stretched out and was thinking, this is a bit ridiculous, but I'm still with it. But that bit for me, I was like, oh, come on. This is just ridiculous.
Tars, translate the data into Morse and feed it to me.
Translating data to Morse. Cooper, what if she never came back for it?
She will.
Yeah, so obviously the link back. So at the beginning, these gravitational anomalies, the books falling off, and the the sand and stuff telling him where to go. It was all him doing that, but from this black hole.
Communicating through a combination of what was it?
Morse code.
Morse code, yeah.
Morse code, but it was something else as well, wasn't it?
It's the watch.
Oh, binary,
binary.
So binary for the actual coordinates to find the NASA place.
Ones and zeros,
yeah. And then to find out it's also like the watch
it's
as well.
It's that frustration that you get from him because you see him in the room with Morph and he says, "Don't go," or something like that. And
he says, "Stay."
It's not Morph. It's not with Tony Hart. Jesus.
He's like, stay. But because you know the story, you've seen it play out. It's this vicious loop that we get into. So you know that he's going to go, and he knows that he's going to go, despite every effort, and everything has accumulated into this moment.
What is revealed throughout the film is that the reveal of the black hole was created, or the black hole itself was, they said, we were sent the information by them, they, and there's this kind of, we don't know who they are. Who are they? Are they these alien beings? And so whilst Coop is in this fifth dimension, as it were, with he's technically behind a construct which is a bookcase, but he can go throughout time itself in this one girl's bedroom bookcase, like behind the bookcase, and communicate with Murph.
Creepy, isn't it?
Nearly said Morph. Communicate with Murph throughout any period of time in her life. So obviously he can go to key moments, and he's like talking to. And that's the other thing. It's revealed that Tars is still very much alive somewhere else, and he's like these beings. They've created this fifth dimension. So they've turned time and space into a physical construct. And so basically time and space, rather than being something that we can barely comprehend as humans, is something tangible. That's the best words for it. That you can actually go anywhere in the past of this specific moment, this specific area, and communicate any point in time. So he's able to communicate with Murph in all these different kind of time moments, and like, the NASA coordinates, this, that, but also the coordinates, like where they are and everything. And it's really beautiful, this scene, because it's all about, it goes into the speech I was talking about earlier with Anne Hathaway's character, because it's all about love as a science. And so it's, these beings were able to create this for Coop, because they were able to say, like, right, okay, you can communicate with your daughter, and we know you're going to be able to do that because her faith in you is still going to be very much present, because it's her love for you. So you have him able to communicate. She's literally like in the modern world, as it were, she realizes the watch is her dad trying to communicate with her, and then it's that moment where it's like, oh wow, and then it
connects. She
really
connects.
Kind of powerful.
It is powerful. You've got those. It's beautiful, and
it's also a load of bollocks. Like, there's an element of it that I found the first time I watched this film where it's like, what do you mean he's in a fucking bookcase? What a load of bollocks. And it really stretches the realm of believability.
Yeah.
I think in a very similar way to Tenet, it stretches it so far.
No, I will agree with that. But I think what they're doing here is the whole, because if you have a problem with that, then I guess in the way you have a problem with the whole premise of the movie, which is eventually human beings evolve into people that can comprehend space and time, into like build a physical world to save the past, as it were. And I know that's like,
absolutely, and this is the thing I was going to say with the guy that worked on Contact. It's the ultimate fantasy. What if humans could sort of almost like make space their plaything, that they have this ability to both interact and potentially change? So, and again, it's sort of based on this theory that all this stuff is potentially achievable, but again, it's just in terms of like a fairly basic narrative. It just seems so strange that they go on this full circle. It's like, oh, it's just to get to the dad to communicate to his daughter through a bookcase. And
I think
just a bit
the first time
really?
I watched this, I did, obviously, like most people, I just don't think you see this coming at all. You think it's like some kind of
I don't know.
extra.
That's Nige's point, is that it's so out there.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think that, but in my opinion, I thought when I first saw it, that was what was clever about it, because I thought it was like going to be basically like an alien thing or something, or maybe it's just they don't come back to it whatsoever. It's just one of those weird plot holes. But obviously with Nolan, there's always something that's related. But I really enjoyed that aspect of it, and then what I enjoyed more is coming back to it a second time, and then like kind of watching it through the second time and like trying to understand it from that. But I totally get what you're saying with that, and I can understand why.
I think I would ask this question, and this isn't me like saying, well, how would you do it, Nige? But
he probably wouldn't make this film, would he?
No, because I think the problem is Muppets in Space. That's what Nige wants to end the film with a bunch of Muppets.
The big twist is that Matt Damon actually built this world for Coop all along, and Matt Damon is an alien.
He's on Mars.
He's in the other bookcase.
Well, it's interesting. Like, his name is obviously Man with two N's, and obviously he's supposed to represent the worst of humankind. That kind of
I do like that.
That kind of like greed aspect. And it's a very lead film. It's a very Christopher Nolan film through and through, I'd say. So like so many layers to it, so many elements to it. You can certainly tell the distinction between the first half and the second half, and then how they stretch that really.
There are moments where it drags a bit, I think, on...
Well, then, like the very end, we're skipping forward beyond he basically saves the day, gets rescued, which again stretches the realms of believability.
That is, I will agree with that. That is the one bit in the film where it's just like because it's a beautiful shot, like that final shot of
him. I hated the moment he wakes up in a hospital bed, and
the world deconstructs, and then there's a beautiful shot of just him, and it's like it's just him floating in space in close up. It's just his head, like with his eyes closed, and you're like, oh, like he died. That's kind of
he saved the world, and she kind of knew it.
And that's
it's this.
That would have, I think, that would have been a really good ending.
It's that extra scene. Right? It's that Hollywood ending where he wakes up in the bed. And then we get old.
It's Mr. Nobody.
Yeah.
He's with his old version of his daughter, and he goes in, and it's like Jared Leto going, Mr. Nobody.
And exactly, and Mr. Nobody's a cracking.
Smith's going to love it then.
But yeah, you get old Murph there, and I
do love this scene.
If they did this scene, why did he need to be in it? Why couldn't he have died? And then she still managed to work out how to save it through some other way.
They stretch it even further. She's like, I'll go and save your missus from the spaceship. And it's like,
oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Like, that's the end?
Too far.
Yeah, it didn't need that. I do love that their story had that moment where they finally connect after what? He says, like, he's 124 years old when he wakes up, which is like, so you look pretty good for 124. You see their story in 3 different sections in this movie, and because you're playing with time, you're able to manipulate it in such a unique way. And like she says, like, no... but it's, one of the age-old things, very true statements, is no parent should ever see their child pass away, obviously. But this is like, it brings a new aspect to that, because it's like, of old age, because that would never happen. But because of the time difference,
I think the irony with that is, she's never spent any time with her dad, because she's never been there. She's only communicated through these kind of messages over the years, and the only...
Well, she was 10, so there was that like core development when she was
this
young.
film is about this like bond between the two of them.
Oh yeah,
like,
absolutely,
humongously, and I don't know.
Whilst weaving in science fiction,
it's bizarre, but. Yeah, for me, like, I don't know if we needed that extra bit with him and her. Like, I feel like it was just too far.
Oh, I really
yeah, fair enough. We need your help. We are looking to grow Off Radar and release more and more high-quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.
Have we got any trivia, Nige?
We've always got a little bit of trivia. I mean, we've already spoken a bit about Matt Damon.
Let's talk more. The Martian.
It's almost like a Kevin Spacey, like he wasn't in any of the marketing for this film or the promotion, didn't attend any of the premieres, was never mentioned. It was only one singular Variety article that he indicated he was cast in an unspecified role.
Wait, who's that?
Matt Damon.
Oh, I see, sorry.
Yeah, it was kept completely secret until the release of the film, and that was the only time that people knew it, really. So yeah, Matt Damon popping up, and like Christopher Nolan's always been extremely sort of confidential when it comes to his scripts. Like, for instance, Jessica Chastain was shooting a film in Ireland, and they got someone to fly out the script, show her the script, asked her if she wanted to do the film, and then immediately took the
They burnt
away.
it right in front of them.
They burnt it. They were
Put
like,
it in a rocket and put it in space.
It was filmed under a fake name called Fiona's Letter.
Oh, I love those fake names.
That's actually named after his daughter, Fiona, as well. So obviously, it's got a bit of love there. Story about his daughter, etc. But one of the most interesting things about Interstellar was actually, although it was released in 2014, it was the most pirated film in 2015. It was actually Space Pirates starring Dennis Hopper. No, that's not true.
Wow.
But as a result, there's a Russian YouTube mockbuster, which I'd never heard of before, called Interstellar with one L. And it was basically reached hundreds of thousands of views because people were mistaking this pirate copy of the true version of Interstellar.
Oh, wow.
Eventually it got deleted and then got reinstated on another channel in 2016 to coincide with the sequel, Interstellar 2, Operation Terror 2014. Which we're obviously going to review on a future podcast.
That sounds very doable. Yeah, very reviewable.
So there you go again. And then the last bit of trivia, TARS, T-A-R-S, the acronym actually stands for Technically Artificial Robotic System.
Oh, wow.
And that's partly because when they were showing the mock-ups of the creation to Nolan's kid, they were like, it's a bit lame, it looks rubbish. And then they were like, oh, well, technically, like an artificial thing.
Well, that's
good trivia, Nige.
So there you go.
What do we think and what are our ratings of this film? Etok, let's go to you first.
Okay, so here's the next half hour of this podcast. I understand.
We need a synopsis for Etok.
Yeah, I need a synopsis for the review. No, I understand why people like. I know this film is somewhat divisive. I'm sure I've kind of heard. I've heard some people go.
I think so. All Nolan's films are, to be fair.
That's very true. Yeah, with this film, it's like I really, really like it, but I can 100% understand someone going, "Oh, this is slow." Nige mentioned some of the, it slows down in the middle. I love all the pacing throughout this film, and I do love all the science and the guff, as it were. Just like, oh, let's hear about this. And this film always holds my interest, which is why I say I've seen it numerous times. Like before we even knew we were going to review it, I'd seen it I want to say maybe a couple of months ago, and then watched it the other day again to review it again, even though I knew I could review it without having seen it again. So I was like, I really want to watch it. So obviously something about this movie really connects with me. I do like the whole the ending, although I understand why Nige doesn't, for example, and probably numerous people don't, because it does take a film that is very grounded in its science fiction, and that's one of the things I really love about this movie is it's so grounded in it's so grounded in its science that you find it really easy to believe what they're doing can be done, because I'm sure through theory a lot of this is achievable. It's just we haven't got there yet. So watching this film, I'm like, oh yeah, I buy into that. So I understand why suddenly he's drifting through a black hole and he's behind a bookcase communicating through strands, through Morse code, and then through a watch. I understand that. I want to just say, I don't think we really talked about it. I love the visual representation of that. Yeah. Like if you say, right, the character needs to talk to someone in the past, it's like, oh, it's going to be this or it's going to be that. It's like, no, I like the idea of there being strands, and that's how he does it. And it's all manipulation of gravity and stuff. Really, really fascinating stuff. But yeah, I really, really like this movie a lot. So I think it's got, visuals, obviously, I think you'll both agree that visuals are ridiculous at times, fantastic. Really good characters, really good acting. I think it starts off a little bit like, oh, where's this going with, like I say, a bit heavy-handedness of who these characters are. Like, this is the clever daughter, this is the somewhat curmudgeon-y grandpa kind of thing. But yeah, I think, and I love the science, I love the pacing, and yeah, I understand the ending being a bit like, yeah. But no, I really, really love this movie. Like, I could watch it over and over again. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10.
Wow, nice. A 9 out of 10. I will go next. I see what I'm finding Nige quite hard to read on this one. Is this going to be the film that you dislike and we like? We will see. I think I agree. I really enjoy this film. It's one of the, like, Nolan, for me, like, he is really Marmite. I really like some of his films. I really like
Marmite Nolan.
Marmite Nolan. I really like Inception. I really like Prestige, Memento. But then there's been quite a few that I don't, like Tenet, and I wasn't a fan of Dunkirk. But then also I'm a little bit divided over Oppenheimer, which, as I say, I saw at the cinema, and although I found it a really enthralling watch, I just wonder how that will kind of translate to the small screen. So, like, I always go in thinking I'm going to love a Nolan film, but actually there's been a fair few that I've kind of left disappointed with, because I expect like Inception, which I'm not going to lie, that's one of my favourite Nolan films. So yeah, with this film, like, I think it's really interesting. I love the fact they've casted, like I said at the front, McConaughey in this film. I think it adds so much more kind of gravitas, but also like it understates that whole space film where we're not so used to having George Clooney or, someone very slick and assured in this kind of hero role. Like, McConaughey isn't that kind of actor. He's a proper actor, and that really works really, really bloody well. All the cast do a good job. I do feel like at times there are like moments where, like they're meant to be like a lot older and they're not, and it's a bit lazy. Like some of that, I don't know, like you could do something better with that, and it kind of makes you, it steps you out of that. And like I said, like I didn't love the kind of ending happy ever after scene. I feel like we could have still had this world that they've now created on this kind of like utopian spaceship, but I didn't like the fact that he wakes up and gets to see his daughter again. I don't know, maybe you're right, maybe it would have been even better had he just gone through that black hole and died, and there's this huge question mark, which obviously there is in like films like Inception. The visuals you spoke about, we've all spoke about, I think I won't argue that in any Nolan film you're treated to, a spectacle. And I think had I seen this at the cinema, it would have like elevated it even more. Yeah. I know that people saw this at the IMAX and were kind of like blown away. And I'm sure that kind of leaves a, like something on you, like when you see a film like that at the cinema. But, like with some Nolan films, they don't make you think and they don't make you care, but they make you think. With this film, I feel like it does both. So I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Nige.
Okay.
Where are we at?
So for me, like, sometimes when we do this podcast, a film gets said for us to sort of go back and watch, and I'm a bit like, oh, this is going to be a chore. And for me, Interstellar was one of those. And like, when I try to do is when I watch a film, I'll leave a review on IMDb, and I checked that out before I went back to watch this, and I'd actually given it a 4.
Wow.
4 out of 10. Yeah. Because the first time I watched this film, as I said, the whole bookcase bit, it just made me very angry. Angry. More to the level that it made me angry when we watched
Tenet.
Oh, what was it? Bloody Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt running around.
Edge of Tomorrow, with the ending like just kind of ruined it for me, and that was the case for this. But I tried to go back to this and watch it with an open sort of frame of mind, although it almost been 3 hours again. It was one of those things where it's like, oh god. so I couldn't remember loads about the film, and the bits I could remember, I suppose, were obviously the bookcase bit and sort of McConaughey being a bit of a tour de force, I suppose. And it's really interesting, actually. One of the things I didn't mention earlier was, so McConaughey and Matt Damon worked on this film, and it was like the first time they'd ever worked together. And so Matt Damon expects McConaughey to be this like super laid back comic character, whilst McConaughey almost expected Damon to be this sort of super serious and quite dry. And it was actually the opposite. Like, McConaughey, when he works, is super, super serious, like dedicates himself to his craft, whilst Damon like just likes to mess around a bit. And really interesting. But yeah, I think McConaughey is really well cast in this. I think Michael Caine's brilliant in this, and I think like Jessica Chastain as well, fantastic. Annie Hathaway, I've kind of gone off a bit like over the years, but even she's like really strong in this. And as I said, the Hans Zimmer soundtrack is exceptional. Yeah, so good.
So unbelievably good. Like the visual side, the effects, absolutely incredible. And as I kind of watched this, I found myself getting drawn more and more into the story, like feeling like emotionally attached, enjoying it as the time was passing. But I actually had to stop watching after an hour because I had to run off and do something, and I was desperate to get back and carry on watching the film because it had really drawn me back in.
There's a butt coming.
The ending.
Well, I really enjoyed the kind of scene, like the world beating of this kind of Earth being in such a terrible state with all those crops failing rather. And there's a brilliant scene. It's like a early scene, like where they go and watch baseball, some like ramshackle sort of county game. It's actually the New York Yankees, because the sport has obviously fallen so far in this sort of dystopian world. But yeah, getting through the film, there's like bits in space I enjoyed, and maybe they lost me a little bit. And then towards the end, we get to the bookcase scene, and I'm like, oh God, here we go again. But this time, actually, I think I paid a bit more attention. I understood where it had come from. I understood the fact that people from the future had built this. It's not just something that had kind of fallen in their lap and kind of unlocked this film a bit more for me.
Oh.
Yeah, I still have concerns about the very end, like about him being rescued. Like it's a bit far-fetched. I think the quality in this film, in terms of the visual, the fact it doesn't drag whilst almost being a 3-hour film, the score being incredible, and some of the scenes, like you mentioned, about the scenes when they're getting their messages back from Earth and they've been on this planet for 27 years. Some of those scenes, like, they really did touch me. So yeah, it's a bit of a turnaround for me. I'm actually going to give this film 8 out of 10.
Oh, he did a Nige.
That was a massive twist. That was
a
like
massive
finding
Nige.
Matt Damon on a planet.
On second viewing, I appreciated this film, well, clearly a lot more.
Oh,
that's incredible.
That's really interesting.
That's double.
There's still the whole bookcase bit where I'm a bit like, oh, it's very far-fetched, but the story, I guess there's a lot you kind of have to take with a big pinch of salt. And just like you have to believe that there's a fact that future humans have designed this very elaborate thing. Surely, if they're future humans, they can just do things. But it is explained that they just can't interact themselves. So, yeah, it's... They have to choose someone else to do it.
And guys, what do you think of Interstellar? Was it out of this world?
He's been saving that one for his entire goddamn
just thought of it.
that.
Or I can't think of the alternative. Or not.
Or is
in
it...
the bookcase?
Or was it a big dust ball?
Is it a big wormhole?
Is it inescapable
Is
planet?
it rubbish black hole? Get in touch, email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast. Let us know what you think about Interstellar. What's your rating? Give us your rating. We'll read it out on our end of season leaderboard episode where we go
feel
through
free to
all
watch
the films.
it twice and give us 2 ratings. Like I did.
4 and 8.
Yeah.
Incredible.